from the heart of Dubai, where tomorrow is being built today, to the world. Welcome to the CTO Show with Mehmet. Here, we redefine technology and reimagine possibilities. With Mehmet, delve into the riveting realms of AI, cybersecurity, and digital technology. Experience the thrilling highs and lows of startups. Immerse yourself in the spirit of entrepreneurship and witness the future of business innovation being written in real time. Now, without further ado, let's tune in and explore the future.
Hello and welcome back to a new episode of the CTO Show with Mehmet. Today, I'm very pleased joining me, Tammy Klotz. Tammy, thank you very much for being with me on the show today. The way I love to do it is I keep it to my guests to introduce themselves. So a little bit more about you, your journey, and what you're currently up to. And then we can start to take the conversation from there, which I promise the guests, the audience, it's something really, really cool. So the floor is yours.
Excellent. Thank you for having me today, Mehmet. I'm happy to be here and would love to tell you a little bit more about me. So I am currently a 30-year veteran of the IT technology space. Spent several years in infrastructure-related roles, and then for the last 10 years have been very much focused in the cybersecurity space. I am actually currently in a CISO role at a company called Trinzio, and this is my third CISO stint in the manufacturing industry. One energy, two chemical manufacturing organizations. So that's kind of the helicopter view from a professional perspective. Personally, I live in Allentown, Pennsylvania. I have two successful daughters, yes, native to the Allentown area, grew up here, haven't ventured far, but with all of my professional experience, I've had the opportunity to travel around the world and work with a lot of great people. And most recently, in April, I released a book called Leading with Empathy and Grace, and doing a lot of focused discussions like these, really focused on leadership techniques to build high-performing teams. It's something that is a passion of mine, and I've been told I bring a lot of unique and positive energy to an organization. So I'm really wanting to help instill that in your listeners today.
That's great. And thank you again, Tammy, for taking the time and being with us here today. A question that I didn't prepare, honestly, but, every single guest I had who works specifically in cybersecurity, I ask them why cybersecurity, and, especially being a CISO, and I have, in my network, a lot of CISOs, like you have probably the most difficult job ever is to keep the lights on and, make sure that, is there anything specific that attracted you to be in that space, or like, what was like the main thing that, made you decide, what, I want to be in this space?
Okay. So it's an interesting story. So let me give you a little bit of background. I spent 24 years at Air Products. The last 3 years of that part of my career were actually in the internal audit function, where I had a lot of opportunity to understand more about the control structures within an organization, what the board is interested in hearing about. And then as part of that, we had done the first ever cybersecurity assessment of the program at Air Products. So that was really my first dip, if you will, into the cybersecurity space. And then what happened, the company had decided to spin off its chemicals division and start up a brand new company, which was then known as Versu Materials. And as part of that, there was an entirely new leadership team that was being formed. And I was given the opportunity to interview for one of those positions. And I had interviewed for something that was not the cybersecurity role or the CISO role. But after the interview process, the incumbent CIO came to me and he said, I want you on the team. I don't want you in the role that you interviewed for, but I want you in the cybersecurity, the CISO role. And I kind of looked at him and said, really? And the reason, because I said, well, there's probably a lot more people out there that know a lot more about this than I do. But his point to me, and very wise at that point in time, was, look, you've been with the company 24 years. You have excellent relationships with the leadership team. You know the business, and you also have the audit background from a controls perspective. We can work on all the rest of the stuff. And, so it was kind of that push or that nudge that actually got me into the cyberspace. And I've stayed there ever since. And I think one of the things that has kept me here is one, the ability to translate cybersecurity risk into business risk, and working with the business leaders in the organization is something that I thoroughly enjoy doing, to distill some of those complex terms into, business impacting statements, why it's important, how is it going to affect the bottom line of the company. So teaching is something that is kind of inherent in my style. So that kind of feeds right into that. And then the other thing that I will add to that is with regards to the cybersecurity community. It is a very, I'll say, strong community from an industry perspective. And I remember walking into one of my first cybersecurity professional organization meetings, and I knew nobody like 10 years ago. But that organization and many others it is a very strongly connected family, if you will. And in this space, we are all, fighting the same enemy. We are all having to deal with the same sort of attacks. So the collaboration that you get from that community is something that is extremely beneficial and makes all of us successful because we can learn from each other.
Absolutely. And what a journey, Tammy. And, it's really inspiring. And, I was going through many things that you have done. And you mentioned a couple of things. Now, the role of the CISO, in addition, of course, to translate, as you said, the technical details into something that the business can understand. Mm-hmm. So you need also to be at the same time on top of everything as a leader, right? So the first thing I want to ask you, cybersecurity by itself, and I mean, the audience knows. So when we say cybersecurity, we talk about all the risk, all the, the attacks that happens on the business. And, whenever there is an incident, it's like very, very like, everyone will be on a high
alert,
and high alert, like very high stress situations. So from leadership perspective, and I'm very curious to know, like, Tammy, from you, how you can maintain this, ability to manage the stress while at the same time, managing the team in a way that you get them to perform under this extremely, extremely high pressure.
So that's a great question, Mehmet. And I think, we've had to recently practice that, not from a cyber attack perspective, but with the recent global CrowdStrike incident, right? And, there are definitely some things that you need to bring to the table as, somebody who's leading the effort. Because what tends to happen, as you said, in a high alert situations, emotions are high. People are like stressed. They're trying to figure out what to do next. So one of the first things that needs to happen, and it may take a little while, is to really focus on what the facts are. What do we know at this point in time? What is true? What is not true? And then really putting together, a structured plan, ad hoc in a lot of cases, although we all have our incident response playbooks that we follow. But every situation is unique and different, right? So get the team aligned on what the facts are, and then, structure the troubleshooting, the recovery efforts in such a way that it is very clear of who's responsible for what, and how we're going to manage and track the incident. So I'll use my personal experience from the CrowdStrike incident. it was focused on the fact of what were the endpoints that were actually impacted. There were laptops, there were servers, there were applications, there were manufacturing facilities that were impacted. And we couldn't haphazardly go through this process and figure out what we had resolved and what we hadn't resolved. So essentially, we came up with 4 work streams, with a leader focused on each one of those. And they took lead and they took charge to what had to happen in each of those spaces. And then as the broader team came back together, the reporting actually happened across each of those work streams. So identifying what the action plan is going to be, having regular checkpoints, and, trying as hard as possible as it can be sometimes is to really keep the emotion out of it. Because oftentimes people will want to maybe blame other organizations for what actually happened. Or they won't agree with what, somebody is, suggesting that be done. And being able to really filter and be the voice of reason through those activities becomes extremely important. And then 2 other things that I'll add is, one, acknowledging the effort of what everybody is contributing to the situation. We had over 50 people that were signing into those checkpoint calls, and everybody was engaged, everybody was collaborating, and it worked because everybody was aligned, and everybody knew what their job was. And then the last piece of that is that while the technical team was off doing what they needed to do, there's the media that's going on, everybody wants to know what's happening. Nobody can log onto their computers. So you really have to manage the communications outward, as well. And outward can be to your executive leadership team within the company. It can also be to external counsel or your cybersecurity insurance company or the media in some cases as well. And it's very important, the consistency of the message and the facts of the message, and how that is conveyed. So while the technical team is off doing their thing, you want to protect them so that they can stay focused and people aren't tapping them saying, what's going on, what's going on, what's going on. And then, my role was, essentially being I'll say the translator of taking the information to the executive team in a way that they could digest and understand what was happening and what the impact was. So those are some of the techniques that I use. The CISO, in my opinion, and a lot of others, is not the technical role. It's more the business leadership role. But being able to bounce from both sides of the conversation is one of the things that makes you successful in this role.
Absolutely. And what a great example, Tammy, because it's probably one of the most stressful events, at least in the past couple of years, I have witnessed. Now, I'm going to ask you about something, and even I know you have written a book about that, which is empathy, right? Empathy. And I would relate empathy, honestly, with the resiliency. And the reason I like to relate these two, because I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, Tammy, and this is where I want you to highlight to us and, for fellow CISOs and even someone who might be looking to become CISOs or even any role in technology these days. So leadership, we see this all the time in different places. It's about, being resilient, being able to manage also the stress that you just mentioned, but at the same time, you need to show the empathy, right? So here, how you can integrate, these values, right? Into the kind of leadership style that you have, especially, cybersecurity is very demanding. And what you just mentioned, I can't bring any other good example about a stressful event such the one that happened last month. And of course, because it's going to be, aired the month after. So now it's been 2 months since the CrowdStrike event.
Sure.
So I would love to hear your opinion on that, Tammy.
So, yes. So empathy and grace are definitely not 2 words that you hear typically talked about in I'll say corporations. And it's just that there are two skills that I think are critical to the success for the acknowledgement of the fact that everybody is a human being. Everybody does have feelings, and sometimes feelings nobody is, really like wanting to talk about or skirt around. But that is in fact what makes all of us tick as human beings, regardless of where we live, where we work, what our beliefs are, et cetera. So, the way that, I defined empathy is really around making sure that I'm continuously aware of other people's feelings and maintaining a neutral position and being inclusive with their thoughts and ideas as well. So, as you're in a high pressure situation, this isn't about, making people feel good necessarily, but it's one, acknowledging their contributions and listening to their ideas so that they know that they're being heard. It doesn't mean that you're going to act on everything they tell you, but by listening and active listening to what they have to contribute and what they have to offer, and not cutting them off mid-sentence, not allowing somebody else to talk over them, but giving them the space and time that they need. And that's a delicate balance, especially when you're in a crisis situation, depending upon, the individuals who are contributing. Some folks like to dominate the conversation, which may be with relevant information or irrelevant information. So you really have to be the gauge in that conversation. And, if somebody needs to be, asked to give somebody else some time or basically to stop talking for a little bit, it's all about how you go about doing that, because the respect will come if you say, okay, well, we got to move on versus, well, okay, so, Tom, that's what you had to offer. Sam, what are you going to bring to the table? And really making that inclusive conversation in a very effective and timely type of conversation. Because let's face it, we've got work to do and we've got to get it done.
So tell me, the question, that came to my mind, and part of the initiatives that you do and part of the, operation tasks that you have to do is to hire, the team and, so two things here. So first thing I hear a lot is that it's very hard nowadays to find the skills in cybersecurity, right?
Mm-hmm.
So is this what you're seeing also from your side? The second thing, and part of being a leader, how or what are some of the things that you do or the strategies to make sure that once you have the right talent, you keep them with you? So, because they are very intense, right? So want to hear your opinion on this.
So with regards to finding the right talent, and yes, there's all kinds of statistics out there that say, there's so many open jobs, there's so much demand, but it's actually pretty hard to find resources when you're looking for it, is what my personal experience has been. And whether that's from a cultural fit, a talent match, a skill set, alignment, it can be, it can be challenging. So one of the things that I will typically look for, and it depends on the role in the organization as well, but let's say we're looking for somebody to come into a cyber security operations center role. And, there's a lot of questions with regards to, okay, so, what experience do they need to bring to the table? What type of degree do they need to have? What type of certificate do they need to have? And this oftentimes will become a rub between, maybe in general, the technology space and HR. But specifically for me, I've had to discuss this several times. And because I've been in manufacturing, combining the efforts and skills of both the OT security, the operations technology that happens on the shop floor, and the enterprise-wide on the IT side, oftentimes I will look at what somebody has done prior to applying for the job. And some will be right out of school. Some will be, trying to move within a company. And it's about, one, what experience they bring, but two, what is their appetite to learn and their passion to advance themselves and demonstrate what their skills are from a troubleshooting perspective, from a communications perspective. So I won't automatically dismiss somebody if they don't have the right degree. This is more about, are you a good fit? Can you learn? Do you have the passion and the desire to be successful? So that is one, and that's probably where a little bit of the empathy comes in as well. And then, Mehmet, your second question was specifically around remind me.
Retaining them, actually.
How do they stay with me? So that goes to the building high performing teams part, right? Because as you build out the team and you develop a level of trust and a level of respect with them, it becomes easy, in my opinion, easier to retain them, right? Because they know you have a vested interest in them and in their success. And as long as they feel like they're adding value and their efforts are recognized, I do believe those are the things that will keep folks anchored within an organization. If they're wanting to technically advance, or they've decided to pursue a different career opportunity, that's understandable, right? But I don't want anybody to leave an organization because of their relationship with me in particular, right? So I do spend a lot of time on, in one-on-ones with my teammates, making sure that they know that I am present and listening to them at any given point in time. I make a rule of, if I'm in a one-on-one, there are no other distractions, because that's their time to spend with me and ask me for what they need help with, right? So I think how you retain them is you build a foundation of trust and one of respect. And then even if I have bad news to deliver, it's much better received because they know that I'm being transparent with them based upon our relationship.
Fantastic. Now, another part, which is, I'm trying to cover as much as possible, from leadership perspective, the role of the CTO. So I know the answer, but I always like to hear it from like fellow CISOs like yourself, Tammy.
Sure.
Again, part of, the hard tasks that a CISO has is keeping up with the latest, right? So dealing with stressful events like the one you mentioned a couple of minutes ago about like the CrowdStrike event that happened, or maybe a cyber attack that could happen.
Sure.
Yeah, so that's fine. People would expect that. And maybe it's a kind of a loaded question, so excuse me if I'm putting too much information.
No
so
worries.
the first thing, of course, like the landscape, the technology landscape is evolving, though the way the attacks happen evolves, the techniques evolves. At the same time, I'm sure like as a CISO, you have to deal with a large number of people coming in front of you and saying, hey, like, we've got like, this cool thing that gonna do X, Y, and Z. So this is by itself, I think it, I imagine it takes also some power and energy from any CISO. So I want to hear your point of view on this, about handling the quick changes that are happening, especially we are living in the AI space, and being bombarded by all the messaging that comes. And I can't blame anyone here. I understand. I was there. So how you're dealing with this?
So one of the challenges first is to stay abreast of what is actually going on. Like as an individual, from a CISO perspective, how do I keep my eyes on everything that is going on? And part of that is from that industry networking with my fellow CISO community here in Philadelphia. We have a very strong network that we spend a lot of time comparing notes, sharing stories, etc. So to be able to do that is extremely helpful. And then I think the other piece is to address that from staying on top of things and how you deal with changing technology and everybody who wants to do the latest and greatest cool thing. So there's something to be said for one, the overall balance between productivity and security, right? How do you enhance productivity without sacrificing security? And what I try to do in my role is really talk to folks in terms of risk, and really not be the office of NO, because that's what a lot of security folks are perceived as being, as a blocker. They get in my way. I can't do anything. And we change that that dialogue and basically turn it on its head and have a different conversation about, talk to me about what you're trying to do and why you want to do it. Where's the business value of what you're wanting to do? And then let's talk about how we do that securely, so that your needs and the needs of the organization from a protection perspective are also kept in mind. The other piece of that is really understanding the organization that you work with, work for. What is their risk appetite? How much are they willing to take on in the name of innovation, or in the name of new technology? So, some of it comes down to what you have embedded in, like, your acceptable use policies and your business codes of conduct, because there is a behavioral element to all of that. Don't put company intellectual property out in ChatGPT, for example. That's not really a good idea, right? So we can try to control everything from a technical perspective, but you also need to focus on that education and awareness piece with your end users, because they are, the most common attack vector. So making sure that they're educated and understand what the risks are, and make them pause as part of their daily interactions to say, okay, like, if it feels wrong, I probably shouldn't be doing it, or if I have concerns about it. So having them pause and then being able to ask the questions. So I will spend a lot of effort on that training and education and awareness for the organization at large, so everybody is more prepared with relevant content. And then, it's all about partnership, right? So we have an AI task force that's in place right now. And we have partnered very closely with our R&D organization, our technology organization. What are you trying to do for our customers with AI? What do we need to be concerned about from a security perspective? So it's about talking, it's about conversing, it's about listening, and really putting together a joint plan of how we can accomplish this for the organization.
Fantastic. Now, you mentioned a little bit about, kind of the privacy issues, and putting some data in ChatGPT or any simple tool. So I believe, one of the things that I always discuss with peers, people that they work in the industry, which they see it sometimes kind of, you can see challenges, you can say, like, I don't know, where you have this mix of, the privacy concern, plus, like, we add to it regulations, right?
Sure.
And then we add to it, like, also sometimes ethical considerations, right? And now you have a nice mix, and then you have to go and deal with it, like, and the reason I'm saying this, because, and where I want to hear your opinion on that, Tammy. So sometimes people thinks that, all these measures that the security team put on us is trying to limit our ability to be protective. We have to go over many things, like you're making our lives miserable, right? And I feel, and I want to hear your opinion on this, like, how is the best approach to do? And I know, like, training and, doing this awareness is obviously a strategy, but what can we do better to have, because till now I get surprised to know, for example, people, they don't know much, about, these concerns of regulations, like maybe data can be exfiltrated by a threat actor and it can be published on the internet. So I still think, there's some missing link between the end users or even sometimes the IT department and the security team because of all these things. So what are you seeing in that space, and what strategies, you've seen like working good? Because we have also the ethical aspect, especially, I'm sure, like even in industrial domain, you have these. Because, for example, it's very obvious in healthcare, we have a lot of ethical issues that might occur because of data breaches and privacy concern. So tell me more about this. What's your point of view?
So my point of view is yes. Every industry has their own set of regs that they need to follow, a set of controls that need to be in place specifically, around publicly traded companies or, like you said, healthcare or energy from a NERC perspective, et cetera. So one of the things is to make sure that you are aware and understand what regs your organization is actually being held to, and how you are currently in compliance, hopefully, with those regulations. So getting yourself well versed in that is probably first and foremost. But when people are, getting frustrated with security or why are we doing this? Well, because security said so. It's kind of like the audit song, right? Like, well, we're doing this because internal audit said we needed to. Well, no, that's really not the case. We're doing this because we need to do this for, our companies as an organization. So what I do in those situations is, it's never about, we're doing this for the sake of security. So yes, I'll take a very simplistic example, right? So we are requiring you to, enroll in MDM, a mobile device management tool, if you want to use your personal phone to access company property. Well, that's annoying. I really don't want to do that. You're a big brother. You're going to be watching my personal phone. And it's like, look, if you want the convenience of having one phone and using it to access corporate assets, this is the requirement. This is what you need to do. I think, so explaining to folks about why you're doing something and not just saying this is what we're doing becomes extremely important. Go back to the days when multi-factor authentication was first being introduced. Everybody was like, I don't want to have to do this. I don't want to have to do it on my, personal phone, or, are you going to give me a work phone if I'm going to have to do this? So there's definitely, trade-offs and discussions that can be had. I think the other piece of it is really around when you have examples that are happening within your organization. I think the transparency of sharing that information, so folks do realize that this stuff does happen here, and it's not in a way to name or shame, somebody who accidentally clicked on a link. That's not the point. The point is turning that into a learning opportunity to say, look, this did just happen, right? Or using examples of events that have happened that are very publicly being talked about, like CrowdStrike, like Mayors, like the Colonial Pipeline. Pick an incident, right? And talking about that in the terms of, okay, if this would have happened to us, would we have been impacted? What could have happened if it happened to us? So we try to do, I'll call them case studies maybe, that show, if there's something in the news that's very relevant to our organization. There's been recently an 8K that's been filed for Orion, which is a chemical manufacturing company that was most likely a result of a business email compromise scan. Well, it's somebody in our industry, so let's talk about that. And how does that happen? So again, I am a huge training and awareness person, and I don't mean like taking courses online. I mean talking about, the stuff that really does happen and putting in the context of your own business.
I think this is a better way, Tammy, because, people who rely, for example, only on the online trainings, of course, I'm not saying they are useless. Don't get me wrong. And even I've seen people, they get like good, for example, they can measure, okay, we were like from this percentage of people clicking the wrong link, and now, it gets reduced to this. But the thing is that, I think talking about it and letting people, just in a human to human conversation, understand, what are the consequences of something wrong happened, that it might even affect their jobs, for example. And, I've seen like this is, even from a consultancy perspective, telling it in a story format, like, look, I'm not here to scare you, but look, like this company faced this, and this what happened to them, and they had to do 1, 2, 3, which is not good, and it can happen to us, right? And the reaction is, oh, okay, now I get it. So it's not like kind of just bombarding people with knowledge that they don't understand. So 100% agree with you on this. Now, Tammy, as we are almost coming to the end, something I want to ask you, which is I think we didn't touch on. We repeated that yes, cybersecurity is stressful. Cybersecurity is not easy to do, and especially being in a leadership position, that add another layer of difficulty. So, what have you seen working to have a proper work-life balance? Because you might get calls in the middle of the night, right? Something wrong's happened. So what you can tell us about managing this balance?
So one of the things there's a chapter in the book that's really focused on self-care, which work-life balance is part of that chapter as well. And really, I think one, it's a very individual decision that folks also need to think about and respect, right? So, for me, and being in a high crisis type of industry, the acknowledgement of there is going to be times where, yes, and we all know this, like there is no typical day, right? Because one, we're always connected, but we may, there are going to be times where the weekend of July 19th, I was working all weekend, right? It wasn't an option. It was just something that we had to do. So what I tell people who work for me and who I mentor and I coach is, as part of that self-care, you need to make sure that as an individual, you understand what your boundaries are, and you need to set those boundaries for yourself. And you need to acknowledge when you're willing to compromise and when you're not willing to compromise. And if you operate consistently within those boundaries, you will have a work-life balance that is something that is acceptable to you. I was recently on a panel with a group of women during Women in Tech Week, and the one woman on the panel, she said, "You know what? She's like, I like to work 14 hours a day. Don't tell me I can't. Don't tell me I don't. That's not good for me, because it's what I want to do, right?" So it's the acknowledgement and that self-awareness of what is, your style, what you're comfortable with. Doesn't mean it's for everybody. And then you also have to make sure that as you're working with your team, that if I'm working 15 hours a day, which I don't always do sometimes, right, that it's not the example that I'm setting for them. So I have a very conscious conversation about that, to say, hey, look, if I'm responding to an email at midnight, I'm not expecting a response 15 minutes later. When you get on the next day, that's fine. I have another individual on my team right now. He's a active learner all the time. Well, he would continually get feedback. Well, you're always online, you always respond. So we've had to modify that a little bit, right? Because there are some regions of the world where that's not allowed from a legal perspective as well.
Right.
And it's okay if you're learning, but then don't make yourself available in Teams or, whatever, Slack to be interrupted. Make that your time. So developing those boundaries for yourself, working within those boundaries, I think is what becomes most important. And they're going to change over time. When I was raising my girls, they came first, and I had to make some decisions that said, I'm going to be present for them. And that sometimes meant I didn't work on a Friday afternoon because of something that was going on. But I made sure that my job was still getting done. And if you can focus on that, the boundaries of an office are obviously very different these days since COVID. We all work remote, but the most important thing is that you're getting your job done and you're maintaining that sense of self and the boundaries that you've established for yourself.
This is again eye-opening, I would say, on doing this work-life balance in a proper way. And thank you for sharing your experience, Tammy, with us. Finally, this is the final thing I ask my guests: where people can get to connect with you and learn about your work.
Sure. Best way to connect with me right now is on LinkedIn. Look me up, Tammy Klotz. The one thing I would ask if you want a connection is that you just drop a note that says, I heard you on the CTO show and would love to connect with you. That would always be helpful for me. And then if you're interested in purchasing the book is available on Amazon. It's Leading with Empathy and Grace. And I would love to have you pick up a copy, read it, give me feedback, put an Amazon review out there. But I would love to hear from folks after you've had the opportunity to listen to me today.
Sure. For the folks listening or watching us, don't worry. I will put the link to the Amazon book in the show notes or in the description if you are watching this on YouTube. So you can find it over there. And yeah, as Tammy mentioned, leave your feedback and also leave feedback to me also as well. This is how usually I end my episodes. So if you just discovered this podcast, thank you for passing by. I hope you enjoyed the conversation today with Tammy. And if you did so, please give us a thumb up, subscribe, and share it with your friends and colleagues. And if you are one of the loyal followers who keep coming, listening, and give me their feedbacks, please keep doing so, because I really want to know what you think about the show, what I can improve better, what I can do better. And, so I'm always open to listen to your feedbacks. Even if you don't like something, no problem. Just let me know about it. And as I say, as usual, thank you for tuning in today. We will meet again very soon. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Hit that subscribe button. Share the show with your tech-savvy friends and fellow entrepreneurs. And leave us a review on your favorite podcast app. Your support means the world to us.